Hey, welcome to the fine print, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Caleb Teskey. Today we got a great interview. Well, we already got one viewer. Fuck yeah, we're killing it. Um, before we get into this interview, I have a few thank yous I want to send out. The first one will go to Michelle Chapman. I got I got my highly rooted shirt on. Michelle picked me up in Newport the other night and afternoon and gave me a ride home when I was stranded. Thank you very much, Michelle. It's also a good time to remind everyone, don't be an asshole. I got some Forbin's finest stickers up there. I got my Tom the Ganja delivery guy stickers. We got some Lamoille County Therapeutics, some Omerta Genetics. Boy, I want to thank everyone who watched my interview with Jason Stefano as well, the former Marine. Well, they don't like to be called former Marines. Sorry, former police officer and U.S. Marine Jason Stefano. You guys were super nice to Jason, and I appreciate that. Um, it's also hard for me to talk to police, but I thought we had a really productive interview there with some good stuff in there. And what else did we do? We did the Saltwater Cowboy, Tim McBride. I want to thank Tim for his time. That was a 3.5 hour banger. And Rusty Tap from Kamahina Gold in Hawaii. Thank you guys all for checking that out. And without further ado, let's bring on my guest here. Wham! It's Charles Alkire. Charles, thank you for being here, my man.
Thanks. I appreciate you having me, man.
Can you turn your phone to landscape?
Yeah. Let me do that.
Dang. Thank you to Rodney for teaching me that trick.
There we go.
Charles, it's a pleasure to have you on here, man.
Yeah.
Before we get into anything serious, would you give us your 5-minute life story, please?
5 minutes. Oh man, that's a long time. So
Well, it's gonna be longer, but the basics.
Well, I mean, as far as kind of how I got to be on this show, I would say just making some connections online. But as far as kind of how it all started, I was just a regular dude in the illegal state, decided to join the army. I didn't have much money. School was, outside of my reach. I was going to end up being, indebted forever if I went that route. So I decided to join the military. They're paying for school. You're paying for your loans. They're doing all this stuff. So I figured, hey, might as well. I wasn't like super patriotic or anything, like, because I joined right after 9/11. So it's kind of that time frame where a lot of people were joining, wanting to go overseas, fight for their country, et cetera. But I was just kind of looking at it financially, like, hey, I can't afford school. I better do something for myself to make it a little easier. So decided to go that route. 2 tours overseas, so two full year stints in 03, 04, and 08, 09. The first tour was pretty relaxed, I should say, even though it was like the beginning of the war. We really didn't have any equipment, armor, kind of just threw us out to the wild and said, hey, have fun, good luck. No real safety protocols, anything like that. And fortunately, we were unscathed. The second tour, we ended up having, pretty much no issues throughout until the end of our tour. We got hit with a rocket attack right before we were going home and lost some soldiers. And so, long story short, that experience kind of created an issue with PTSD, which is very similar to a lot of stories you hear from soldiers going overseas, coming home with PTSD, having issues, and really just not dealing with things quite right and quite this like they were prior. Brain's not working the same way, depression, anxiety, things that weren't a part of their life before. And so that happened to me as well. And so when I came home, I was kind of just, I would say, I would shun people. I was kind of just hiding from friends and family. And then I picked back up on cannabis again. I had tried it in high school a little bit, not a little bit, a lot. I really enjoyed it. But I had to give that up. And then I really picked it right back up right away as soon as I got home and decided that it was going to get expensive, so I should start growing it. And that's one thing led to another. And I decided that, I wanted to kind of supply myself and my friends with really good quality, cannabis. And that was a goal that we attained pretty quickly. Unfortunately, ended up getting in trouble shortly thereafter, two or 2.5 years after starting that, and little adventure, and then I unfortunately kind of had to take a long step back from the cannabis world, touching the plant for a few years on probation, and then got back to consulting with friends as this whole Michigan thing blew up.
Before we get to that, could I, whenever I have veterans on the show,
Yeah.
I like to really dig into their military experience as much as they're comfortable sharing.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the PTSD, because that's usually the other question I ask is like, what were you doing in the military? And you said there was rocket attacks, and like sort of how it impacted your life.
Yeah. So the rocket attack it's kind of rare for our role. Like my role in the military was a support-based role. They're called quartermasters. So we do supply, we set up tent cities, we do laundry, supply water, all of those things go into it. And so our role was pretty quickly taken from civilian contractors. So say like if you heard of Halliburton, obviously, and their subsidiaries, KBR, Kellogg Brown and Root. Basically, they were in charge of all of the operations, logistics, and everything else. And so they took our jobs basically. So we didn't really have a role other than pulling security and that sort of thing. And then my second tour, we actually didn't have much of a role at all. We worked like half a day and just like cleaned out our unit stuff and cleaned it and prepped it to go home, because we were preparing the site to pack up and leave. And that rocket attack, we got moved to a separate place in preparation for us moving and going home. So it was about 2 weeks prior to us going home. And so it just happened. We moved to this location, and then boom, we got hit with a random mortar attack. And it happened a few nights in a row, but this one set of rockets ended up hitting right where I was at. I was two Connex units over, so those are like we called them chews, and they're little half shipping containers that were converted into home units. And so I was in the shower stall unit getting ready to go take a shower, and 2 units over, the rocket hit, and just big boom. Everybody's scrambling, trying to figure out what's going on, and in that chaos, I saw things like I saw my sergeant and his body, just and it was, so that's type of stuff. You see that. I saw other things like that before my first tour, just like driving up the roads, you would see bodies and things like that in the road. But that's a little different than somebody that you served with and somebody you're with side by side on a daily basis. And you have,
Sure.
his wife, and an RIP to Sergeant Anderson's wife. She died this year, just passed away.
Right. Well, like if you see some roadkill, that's one thing. But if someone came and shot your dog, that would be a different thing.
That's exactly it. And so, yeah, I mean, that experience and those images burned in your brain, they're hard. And then sleep is the biggest one. Nightmares and sleep terrors. Those were happening a lot more often and frequently before I started the heavier use of cannabis, but it happens, and it's unavoidable at times. And I wish it wasn't the case, but that's unfortunately kind of how we landed there. We've had those experiences that I don't wish upon anybody, but it's common. I think this happened to a lot of people, and a lot of us are finding out that cannabis helps. Some people have other, some people have led to a lot of drinking, suicide, and other things. And so really the goal, in my mind, is let's get people medicated the proper way for them, for their brain chemistry. For me, cannabis does well. For others, probably not always as good. I hope that people stay away from alcohol if they have PTSD. It's certainly a problem. And for those people out there struggling with it, I hope that they're, finding a way to cope.
We got a couple comments up here, Charles. I just want to pop up real quick. We got a gentleman named Lou Rinaldi. He says Charles enjoys dabbing.
Yeah, he does. He does. Yes. I'm not dabbed out today. Like I said, I tend to fumble over my words. I'm not the greatest public speaker, so I try to avoid any sort of intoxicant. because I usually like to go a little bit hard on the
Yeah.
dabs.
Thanks, Lou Rinaldi. Thanks. We got a guy named Dubwise. He says, let's give Charles a dab.
They're trying to get me in trouble. I'm downstairs. If my wife here starts smelling something, I'm gonna get my internet cut off.
Well, I hope you didn't say not high on my account, because I'm getting high too.
Yeah, no. Hey, trust me, do it for me. I'll, as soon as this show ends, I'm going out.
So let me ask you, how does the cannabis help you treat your PTSD symptoms?
Yeah, so for me, it numbs some of this the feelings. It lets me sleep. It calms me down and lessens my anxiety. I've tried a lot of medications. That was the first thing I did. Was I went to the psychiatrist, the Veterans Affairs, and dealt with their mental health unit, and they prescribed me 5-6 different medications at once to take at one point, and that was just a disaster. I had a really bad incident with I actually drank on those pills, which you really shouldn't do, and it just had a really bad experience, and so I quickly kind of shoved those to the side because they were dulling my senses, making me kind of crazier in a way. And so I said, forget this. It's the second that I got off of probation, and in 2015 I quickly started dabbing. It was the best way for me to consume a little more discreetly, being that I'm in Indiana, and so I went that route, and I haven't looked back. When it comes to like certain strains and that sort of thing, like I'm a heavy, like Jack Hare, anything with a heavy terpenoline, those are close to my heart, and really for me the best for my mental health. Unfortunately, I don't have Jack Hare anymore that I'm growing. It's hard to find. It's one of those very few strains that has the terpene profile that I need. So that's unfortunate in my world that, we're kind of still in probation here. So it's hard to, or, prohibition. So it's kind of hard to find and source what you need exactly.
Well, if you ever come to Vermont, let me know. I think we could take care of that.
Yeah. Hey man, Jack Hare is the best by far. There's nothing close.
So you've done some time in the military, did a couple tours, you got busted for weed. It sounds like you also came back and went back to college, maybe with the GI Bill.
Yeah, so that was the first real thing. Like, obviously it was like, hey, I've got to get my college degree done here. So I buckled down. I had a couple years left. I switched my majors from marketing and advertising major to a minor, and then political science, because I was preparing to go to law school. Like I wanted to, my growing and growing in my basement was really what was supplying, funds, but I also was saving a lot of that. And a lot of that was going to go to law school because I knew the expense. My GI Bill was running out, so I wasn't going to be able to utilize any more of that. And so that was really the only option. I was like, hey, I love school. I love reading and writing. I really like kind of the behind the scenes stuff there. And so I decided I was just going to pursue that. But August 31st, 2012 had other ideas. And that kind of led to, just finishing school, getting a job as quick as I could before my record caught up to me and I couldn't get anything. Because that's the other side of the coin. You catch a charge of any kind, drug related, and all of a sudden you're a pariah.
There goes your financial aid too. If you have any,
there goes your financial aid. So like, fortunately, I didn't end up with like a felony, but at the same time, it's still one of those things that you have to put on applications. I just got a job at that time with national insurance company, and I had to get licensed. And like on the application, you have to put if you've ever been, charged with anything, even.
Don't mind me. I'm playing with the view here a little bit. I'm trying to get the one where you look big and I look little. But keep going.
Yeah.
I think that's
so yeah, I was trying to figure out, what solution there would be. and really there wasn't one in the end.
Damn.
But yeah, so I mean, it goes. Long story short, I think that going and getting my political science degree, I thought that I would be able to kind of leverage that with all sorts of different roles with community, investment or community development and all that sort of thing. But really, I mean, these people they have master's degrees, they have law degrees and they're stepping down to do those jobs in a way. Whereas like if you go to be an attorney or something, that the world is open to you on what you want to do. And fortunately, I couldn't get there. The world had other ideas for me, and eventually, like I kind of transitioned out of my insurance role of just like customer service into sales, and I was able to get my license and obtain that, but I had trouble getting my life insurance license because my charges came through at that time. And they're like, hey, you actually put on your application previously that you never had been charged or convicted, but now we're seeing this in the system and we got to go back and take your other license away. And so like I'm starting this career, basically starting to sell, and they're like, hey, you got to start selling insurance tomorrow. But there's an issue with your license. And
your connection's getting a little choppy, Charles.
Oh yeah, sorry there. And
that's okay.
Yeah,
I just want to let you know.
But yeah, so as far as like the getting that role, or having an issue getting keeping that role, I fortunately I was able to get the license. I'm still in this role, selling insurance, but it could have all went completely south if it weren't for having people in my corner, family, friends, people writing letters to like the commissioner and, the judge and all this, just to make sure that like I could provide for my family, or my future family, I should say. And so, yeah, long story short, man, I got into insurance and I'm still here, but I'm trying like hell to get out every day.
So you've got this very kind of interesting background of like military and political science and insurance and cannabis, which seems like it would tuck itself in pretty nicely to something in the industry. And I really want to talk to you about what's going on in your state as well, because it seemed like you were pretty well informed on that, and it sounded like some wild shit out there.
Yeah, in Indiana, I talked to my representative in my district, and I was just straight with them. I was like, hey man, I really want Indiana to be a leader on this. If you're gonna be out in front of the media talking about it, I really would like you to take the ball here and run with it. And he said, yeah, I'm really down for that. I like the idea. And his name is similar to your last name, but but it's not the same. It's Teshka, Jake Teshka in Indiana. I'm only calling him out because he's kind of snaky, and that's one thing I don't get down with. And really, he took all this information from me. He called me. He said, "Hey, it's a great conversation. I like that you have ideas on how to make this a better piece of legislation. You have your eyes on the ball, and when it comes to Michigan and other states like Missouri, Nevada, Arizona, Connecticut, New York, all these states that are kind of doing different things." And I said, hey, like, there's a better way to do this. Listen to what I have to say. I mean, you don't have to follow everything I'm saying, but I'm just telling you, like, if you really want a true free market, and in Indiana, we have this strong libertarian streak. And so if you play to their kind of ego and talk about freedom and how it's a free market, industry, and that should be, focused on the free market, like, I thought that would appeal to him, and it did. But really, I think he just got all the information from me and just said, piss off, dude. I don't really care, because we're not going to do anything. We're not going to do anything here. We're just going to talk about doing something so that it looks like we are the leaders on this. But at the end of the day, Indiana's never going to do anything with legal cannabis until it is federally legal.
So what's the status out there? Do they have medical? Where are we at?
We have nothing. We have Delta 8, man. You have Delta 8, and you have Michigan supplying all of the weed to the Midwest, pretty much. Michigan is the Midwest's trap. It's where people go in the Midwest and parts of the South to get higher quality, cheaper product.
It's the Maine of the Midwest.
Oh, absolutely. It's a top, like I say it's a top 5 state, but in my opinion, it's the 4th best state as far as like industry wide.
What are the other 3? Quick.
I mean, California, Oregon, and Colorado. Those are the top 3. And then
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, and then I would say Michigan 4 and probably Maine 5, only because, and you could really swap Maine out and put them up further, but I would say they're a little more underground. Michigan's a little more above ground with it. And so the accessibility might be a little easier for a random Joe off the streets, whereas sourcing in Maine might be a little more difficult.
Oh shit.
At least from what I've heard. I mean, I don't source in Maine, so I don't know what that's like.
We've got another comment here from this fucking guy, Lou Rinaldi. Sounds like the start of my journey into this advocacy stuff. Tons of stonewalling and deflection and circular redirection. I think I might have been a minute late on that, but
yeah. I mean, honestly, though, I haven't been able to crack into the industry at all, like the licensed legal industry whatsoever. And I mean, in earnest, like I've probably only applied over the last few years, intermittently. So I wasn't really actively trying that hard or on social media pushing for it, because I kind of just I didn't want to jeopardize my existing career and, what people think of me.
Oh, with the insurance industry.
Yeah.
You thought maybe your cannabis a license would conflict with your career.
Well, I thought that maybe like I would have an issue with like talking about cannabis online in media, being known as the guy who likes cannabis that lives in an illegal state but sells insurance to, basically I didn't want to jeopardize my potential sales and insurance for trying to get a cannabis job that I really cared about and wanted. But in the end, through things like your show, what Lou has provided, through his CTMP data, it's opened my eyes to what, obviously I knew, like the MSOs, and they were providing, low quality product, but but really what I found is like their tentacles are deep and everywhere. And, I probably could have eventually landed a role with one of these guys, but then I would be no better than any of the rest of them just trying to push this boof and mids on everyone, and I would have felt probably pretty horrible having done that and made my mark on the industry in that way. So like, in a way, I'm glad I haven't entered the industry yet, because I've learned even more about the negatives and the shady parts of it. And so sitting on the sidelines has allowed me to really game plan and kind of workshop what is wrong and how to approach like the next version of this industry, because I'm sad for it. Legalization was supposed to be something else, and so it was sold as something else, and it's obviously turned out to be completely opposite of that. In a lot of people's minds, I think that
I didn't say it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the cat's out the bag at this point. We all know, that it's not working. It's not working like a lot of other industries are in the country. And at the same time, it's a plant that anybody can grow. Like it's a really, I think we've really regulated it in a poor way, and it's unfortunate that like it's taken this turn to where, just like anything in capitalism.
Can I ask you, Charles, do you think that's part of the problem, that it's a plant that anyone can grow?
Yeah, I think it is. Like, even me, who wants to be an entrepreneur and wants to grow the plant legally and licensed and have a business. Anybody can grow this shit. Like, it's not that hard. If you're a detail oriented person, you care, you're probably going to be able to produce something really high quality by yourself, better than what you can buy in the store usually. And depending on if you grow it indoor, outdoor, and your climate, and your, that sort of thing. But, Yeah, I mean, it's just a plant, and I think it needs to, like, the main legislation that's being pushed right now, that I'm sure you're aware of. I think Box Brown did an article or a comic strip on it recently about treating it as food, treating it, cannabis as food. Look, if I couldn't make money off of it, fine, whatever. Treat the shit as food. Let us grow it. There's going to be natural markets that develop over time anyway. I mean,
Peace to
that's
Brian Brown too. Brian's
yeah,
great. I
it
fuck him.
happens. I mean, it's the markets naturally develop, and there's a reason why tomatoes are sold in stores. Not everybody wants to grow them,
I
and
don't
they
want to
and
grow anything.
they're easy to grow. So let somebody else grow them for you. Trade your labor for some of this, and that's what you get. And so I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to treat cannabis like alcohol, tobacco, or other pharmaceuticals, and we shouldn't be. We really should be taking the opposite approach. And I think that's a failing because we're creating barriers to entry. We're creating extra, and you hear this all the time, like burdensome regulation is, cutting off the oxygen of a business. Well, in this instance, it really is. This is one of those definite instances where the regulations are asinine for the most part on what it's doing to the industry and how it, do I think safe banking or some version of safe banking is needed? Yeah, sure. But obviously there's way more issues that we need to solve for first before that happens, because all you're doing is giving these existing players a huge leg up that they already have.
I thought that safe banking was bullshit. I read that. I read all 7 pages of the first verse. It's like
it
the
is.
first sentence is an act to provide protection for financial institutions. Like, oh, that's just what they need.
Yeah, it was a pretty bad bill. I mean, honestly, it's more of just a handout to these large guys, allowing them who are running failing businesses to recapitalize. And
that's exactly what it is. And there's nothing in there. They said, "Oh, it's going to help small businesses because they can now have access. They can put their cash in a bank." Every business I know already has a bank account. It's required by law.
Yeah.
And also, like, it's just, boy, it did more to provide liability protection for banks giving out bad loans. Like, oops, we lent money to a Coke dealer, and we're not liable because the Safe Banking Act.
The Safe Banking Act.
Yeah. So they said, oh, it'll open up these lines of credit. It's like, that doesn't guarantee that a bank will give you a loan. Just because a bank can give you a loan doesn't mean they're gonna.
Nope. And just because Visa, American Express, MasterCard, and Discover can start processing your transactions doesn't mean they will. And that's, and that's the thing, is like they're hanging their hat on this idea that like these small businesses are going to be able to get capital. These small businesses are going to be able to take card, and now they're going to be able to compete. Not necessarily. And so to think that, and to hold your hat on that and hang your hat on that and to say that that's a guarantee, it's a poor business plan too stoned to fail.
Look at this fucking guy. He just keeps commenting.
Yeah,
I think he's stalking me.
Keep bringing it.
Nice, Lou. So I'd like to ask you. You mentioned Lou earlier, and you said he kind of turned you on to some things. I'd like to know kind of the type of things that he told you about.
One of the big things that we early on, I think his biggest thing with the Connecticut medical program, and I was trying to help him with like the similarities and differences between the Michigan medical program and the Connecticut one, and like the mold limits. And that was his biggest thing at first, was basically they were changing the mold limits without disclosure and increasing them tenfold at that time. And he was, pushing on like, hey, one, if you're going to do it, you need to tell us you're doing it. And two, if you are going to do it, don't lie to us and tell us that the mold limit is X when it's actually Y. And so he was kind of just, exposing this corruption within the state. And I was there for it. I was just like, man, I love seeing it. I love every bit about, him just kind of throwing them to the wolves. And I was helping a little bit, just saying, hey, because I think he automatically assumed like 10,000 CFU a CFU was like moldy weed, which wasn't the case. But it does look like that when previously, like, your limits are 1,000, and then all of a sudden you're saying actually it's 10,000, and then you're like, no, wait, it's 100,000, and then I'm like, okay,
Question. Can I interject here?
Yeah.
Because I've seen stuff like this before.
yeah,
They started spraying glyphosate on crops.
oh, yeah,
And then suddenly they were failing all these tests. They're like, let's just raise the fucking limit.
oh, yeah. That's pretty much what happened here. That's what's happened in a lot of states. Like, I would say nationally, I would say the limit for mold is 100,000 colony forming units. Like, that's pretty much standard for adult use. That's considered a kind of the standard. No matter if you're in Michigan, or California, where you might get more humidity, or wherever, it's the same standard. And when it comes to medical, the standard in most states is up to 10,000 colony forming units. Very rare have I seen, nor would I ever expect to see 1,000 or under. That's really rare. I mean, that's basically like you're producing it in a super sterile environment, and you're remediating everything and pre-remediating things, using hydrogen peroxide. I mean, basically sterilizing everything from the moment it starts to the moment it's processed.
And remediation was one thing I really wanted to talk to you about.
Was what? The remediation? Yeah. I mean, I'm
you did my own segue for me.
Yeah, there we go. I mean, I'm completely anti-remediation. There should be no reason you ever have to put your plant in a machine. You failed at the quality level you need to grow the plant properly, or you screwed up the dry cure process somewhere. So you screwed something up along the way, and so the root cause is you need to fix your operation. Not we just need to continue to produce this stuff and have it pass test as long as we remediate, with visible molds and all sorts of other just nastiness going out to market. And we're seeing it. Like, you see it even in the Michigan market, because it's mostly prepackaged stuff now. People will open.
Even though you said the Michigan market is one of the top 5 in the country.
Yeah, it's partly chain of custody. There's so much product moving in and out of, from distributors and cultivators to the dispensaries, and sometimes the stuff's sitting there for months without being packaged, just sitting there in a bag, waiting for their other inventory to clear the shelf, because there's so much inventory here in the state that basically this stuff's molding in their storage lockers before they're
I've
packaging.
seen the same thing in states with much less supply, Charles.
Yeah, and it's happening everywhere. It's happening everywhere, and it doesn't matter if you're a state that's doing well, you have a huge market and lots of sell through, or if you're a state that's slow moving. Like, mold's going to happen. Like, this is it's an agricultural product that honestly you should have a little bit of moisture in when you're drying it and curing it. Sure. And so the state of Michigan has now kind of tried to push operators into the direction of, you need to dry the shit out of your weed so that it passed the moisture content test. And then, down the chain, you got dry, crumbly weed with no terps, smells like hay. While I say that it's a top 5 market, it's same thing for like Maine. The caregivers.
We're always going to have that.
The caregivers are really the ones pushing the market, in Maine and even in Michigan still. Like, they're the ones producing.
You're going to have subpar products coming out of wherever.
Yeah, you can't produce, even the best growers in a commercial space can't produce as good as somebody in their home basement that knows what they're doing. It's at scale, cannabis doesn't grow as well. It just doesn't. It doesn't matter if it's 100 plants or 300 plants or 1,000. They don't grow as well. They're not attended to the same way as a small tent or a little closet or wherever else you have. It's not the same. And any good cultivator will tell you that, like, hey, my commercial operation is always going to be a step below what I can grow at home.
Yeah,
And
I've never heard anyone argue with that.
No, and it's
Not
a
anyone I
lot of
respect, anyway.
a lot of it's regulations too, you know, and it's the, I wouldn't say burdensome, but just unnecessary regulations that just don't add to the, you know, the value prop of the plant. Like, why are you worried about the moisture content? Like, I know you're worried about mold, you know, Michigan, but why don't you just teach people how to fucking dry and cure the right way? You know, or you know, provide some SOPs so that people aren't having to go to these rad source machines.
Well, if it's anything like the Vermont government, it's probably they don't teach people that because nobody fucking knows how to do it.
That's pretty much it. It's
a blind leading the blind over here.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Michigan's pretty informed when it comes to, like, there's some pretty informed people with cannabis, but in government in general, they're always going to be less informed than the general population. And I mean, the person that is in charge of, he was just announced today. So there's this ongoing rumor in Michigan that distillate prices were going.
You beat me to that. That was on my fucking list, Charles.
Oh,
I saw your LinkedIn post earlier.
I stole your shit, man. No, so basically, yeah, I mean, Brian Hanna, he's the executive director of the CRA, the Cannabis Regulatory Agency in Michigan, and he basically had to, like, dispel rumors that distillate, there was a pending recall for distillate in the state coming, a big one that was going to affect wholesale pricing. Well, this rumor was being pushed on Reddit and LinkedIn and Twitter, and it got to him to the point where he's felt compelled to speak on it and say there's no recall pending. Like, you know, yes, liters of distillate have went from $1,200 to now at $8,000. So that means $8 a gram for a gram of distillate, for viewers out there, and it was $1.20.
Thanks for explaining that. Some of my crowd needs that.
Yeah, and so it was $1.20.
I do.
Yeah, so it was $1.20, and now it's $8. And so we were hearing that it might be going up to $10 per gram for this distillate, because this recall could end up pushing it in that direction. Well, all that's been happening is really this, like, inflation-induced paranoia that distillate was going to be harder to come by. Naturally, in any market, just like toilet paper with COVID, you know, you've got people going and buying up and getting as much stock as they can and driving the price straight up. And so that's what's happening in Michigan. So we will be, I would expect, probably this month, next month, and beyond, we're going to be seeing one or two things happening. I don't know if both will happen, but it's either we're going to see record prices because people are not going to change their buying habits. They're just going to continue to buy them, even if they're higher priced, or they're going to change their shopping habits and buying habits, and they're going to spend less, and you're going to see that Michigan, that revenue number dip from these records that they've had. I think we've been at 250 million plus the last couple months as far as revenue generation out of the state. And I think if you start seeing prices double on certain products, you might see less trips into Michigan from Indiana people, from Indiana folks, from Illinois folks, from Ohio folks, from Kentucky, Tennessee, etc.
So what's the status in Illinois and Ohio?
So Ohio is like is a med-only state with really strict limits on what kind of products you can have. So, like, I think it's like 0.8 grams on a car, or like, it's these weird limits. I'd have to pull up the law, but basically they're like, instead of a gram, you have like 0.7 or 0.8 that you can buy. Instead of an eighth of weed, you have to buy 2.8 grams or something like that. And it's all like Cresco and big MSOs that kind of have dominated. And so there are retail stores, but the prices are too high and the product selection is not very good. And so for Ohio patients, they just head straight up to Michigan, use the medical market, or just buy adult use. Illinois, same thing, except they have recreational, except their prices are just obscene. You go to any place in Chicago or even just border cities, along the Missouri or
Shout out to
Iowa.
Anna Rose Epstein. Hey, up in
Yeah.
Chicago. Hey.
Hey, yeah, hey.
Yeah.
Either way, it's really not cheap to buy product there. And so if you're a connoisseur or just a heavy user, you're taking your ass to Michigan. You're risking the short drive in Indiana to get to Michigan just to get your product, because you're saving in taxes and everything, really. And it's MSO dominated again. Cresco, Verano, those are the two big dogs in the state of Michigan. I believe both are headquartered in the state as well. But to give you an idea, Verano is huge in Michigan, in Illinois. Tons of retail, tons of cultivation, processing. Same thing in Connecticut, I believe. Verano kind of runs shit over there, along with several other East Coast locations. They have one, and it was the first retail shop in the state of Michigan to get approved. By a 10th. The first retail shop to get approved was on a border town, the closest one to my house, actually, and in Indiana. So it's like a 15-minute drive to get to this dispensary. It was the first one that opened, and Verano opened it. And guess how much Verano's expanded since then in Michigan?
The whole way? No, nothing. That was it.
That was it. Why do you think that was?
Well, that's why I go with extreme guesses. It was either nothing or the whole way.
They saw the writing on the wall, man. They knew quickly that with a non-limited license state where anybody could get a license if the jurisdiction had zoning property in the proper zoning location and the state was going to approve it anyway, they said, all right, we're gonna stick this one out, our Zenleaf retailer, and try to push it, but we're going to maintain the highest prices in the state, just like we do in Illinois. And we're just going to take that approach. They've come down since then. But I mean, they haven't expanded because they're not making money. Like they can't make money off of just that retail shop. They're not vertically integrated in Michigan. They're completely on the sidelines, just collecting purchasing wholesale and retailing. And I'd imagine it's just a matter of time before they probably sell that unit and move on, because like their CEO has said on Brian Fields' The Dime podcast. One episode.
Brian was on my show.
Yeah, Brian. The one episode I listened to was on an airplane. I saved it, and that was the episode I listened to, and it just had me so pissed off, and not at Brian. But it was more at the CEO, and I can't remember the dude's name, but it was just like, yeah, we have this strategy where we will just, we're going to focus on our limited license states with no competition, basically. But he didn't want to say that, like, we don't want to
compete. Investments.
Well, he's like, yeah, we have high quality. Of course we do. But we really don't want to compete with anyone, which, and I was like, Brian, like, I heard your interview, and I'm like, suffice to say, I think that their product isn't that high quality, or they would want to compete. Wouldn't you say? And he's like, no.
High quality product, you don't have to compete. This shit will sell itself.
Yeah, and they can't compete, and they know it. And so, like, that's why they're going to stick in Illinois, where they can maintain high margins. And that's why they're going to push hard in Connecticut to grab up every equity joint venture they can, and, basically pay to play schemes to get these.
You want to touch on the equity joint ventures?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's trash. It's tokenism. It's the new tokenism, man. And I hate to see it, because like, there's probably really good people getting wrapped up in this. I'm sure there are. Like, there's probably naive people, maybe people that were just not as in tune to the market and some of the things that these players have been involved in. But it's complete trash. It's entirely. It's basically just trying to find a way to make things look good on the outside, but maintain ownership, direct ownership, in the end, with a multi-state, company. And that's really what it is. I mean, it's not intended to like pull people up by their, their bootstraps and getting these great careers and positions that will escalate into something greater. It's a way for MSOs to put somebody in a position so that their PR looks good and they can make money on this, make money off of it, and eventually pull the plug and take the business away from them. That's what's going to happen here. It's a guarantee.
I'm supposed to remain neutral, right?
Yeah, but
I'm a journalist.
But it's a reality.
Yeah, that's what's happening.
Yeah, that's what's happening. It's not like, in Michigan does this too. So like, I say good things about Michigan, and I think Michigan has it wrong with social equity as well. Their focus has been on like trying to highlight a lot of the people of social equity, provide discounted applications and seminars and like liaisons to help navigate the process of applications and all that.
Consulting firms.
Yeah, exactly. But it's at no cost to the entrepreneur that's a social equity candidate. So like, that's a good thing. But where it becomes bad is the same thing of every other state, where you can basically get somebody, put this person in charge as a figurehead for this retailer, cultivator, processor, secure transporter, lab, whatever it may be. But in the end, the actual ownership structure is majority. I mean, in the end, it will be all MSO, 65-35, I think is what Connecticut does. Michigan is like, I believe, just 51, like just majority ownership.
As well, 51.
Yeah, and so like that's not gonna really, it's not gonna work in the end, because right now we see what's happening. Like, there's tons of companies in receivership or just not making money, and so what's gonna happen? They're gonna say, "Hey guys, you can't afford to pay your loan. Well, safe banking just got passed, and I got a huge fucking loan, so I'm gonna buy you off. I'm gonna pay off your debt and take this business from you, since it's past our window of opportunity." And that's going to be wholesale what's happening. And some of these are just going to shutter. Like, they're just going to be like, yeah, we don't like that location. We're just going to let that one go. That's done. But we'll expand elsewhere strategically where it makes sense. And so that's really all it is. It's just a way for MSOs to grow larger and capture more of the market share. That's the simplest way to put it.
That's what it felt like to me, was a publicity stunt.
That's all it is. Like, I've had this one browser tab open on my tab for about a year now. I have not let that tab go. I keep looking at it on a daily basis. Like, I'm going to fill this out. And I've never filled it out. And it's a joint equity. Like, it's like the joint ventures for Michigan. Like, are you interested in like getting a job or being mentored or, getting capital? I've never done that, because I don't want to explain anything about my business concepts to anybody within the state to take them from me and steal them. And second, I'm just not comfortable with their solutions to equity and social equity, because the people that they do have, like, with being advertised as social equity candidates, social equity businesses, they're not doing shit. They're not actually providing anything to the community. They're not providing seminars on, expungement or, how to properly, consume cannabis for medication purposes. They're not, helping with legal documents, or like, there's a long list of things that the state said, hey, you can do all of these different things, and we will count you as a social equity business if you hire these people, do this, do that. And the only thing that they're really doing is hiring people. They're hiring people of color, that maybe don't know about the plan at all. But they're doing that so they can, capture a little bit of a discount on their application, or can say that they're social equity, but they're not doing actually anything that you would relate toward social equity and providing, stuff that breaks stigmas. And
some of those jobs I saw were not particularly like good wages.
Yeah. No, I mean, a lot of the jobs in Michigan are probably, at least for me, I mean, even in Illinois, I'm looking at Illinois and Michigan roles all the time, and they're very similar. I mean, as far as like 14, 15 bucks an hour to like your cultivation lead.
Dude, McDonald's half a mile from my house starts at 18.
Yeah, 710 Labs. You've heard of them, right? Big hash producer.
Yeah.
Multi-state can't pay their employees shit, like 16 an hour, maybe 17 an hour for those are the people that are washing your hash. Those are the people compressing your shit. I mean, come on,
One thing I wanted to ask you was because you talked about I believe some of these bad real estate deals, and I was wondering if you think maybe that ties into their inability to pay employees or their unwillingness, or maybe the property is just more important than the people.
I like you, Caleb. Yeah, that's exactly it. So it's more than two things, but the two biggest things in the industry are bad real estate deals, like you mentioned. I'll talk about that. And the second is loans, bad loans, debt. And both of these are debt related, but one is a debt related on real estate where there's two things that really have happened. You signed a bad deal because you thought, hey, this is cannabis. I can make a fuck ton off of this. Like, look at these margins. Our assumptions and our projections are so high. Like, we're easily going to be able to afford this unit in this space. We should have no problem paying that. Price compression happens. All of a sudden, shit, our margins are thin. We can't expand. We can't pay employees any better. The market about, I don't know, 2020 or, in 20 or 21 with COVID and everything, wages started increasing too. And that was when our price compression in Michigan happened at the same time. And so you had these two forces hitting all at the same time, and you have bad real estate deals, and then you have debt loads that are 10, 15% hitting. They can't pay their taxes, they can't pay their debt, and they can't pay the real estate. How are they going to pay employees? And it's the foundations of a business.
Well, that's a great set of points you're making there, Charles.
And it's a foundation. It's the business foundation. Like you set your business up on the wrong foundation, right? Like any smart business owner or entrepreneur say, well, is your business model profitable? Like, when do you start making money? Like, is it the first year, second year, middle of their first year, third year? Every business is different on how that will happen. These guys were like, we'll be profitable when we're profitable. Who gives a shit? It's about market share and capturing market share right now. That's all that matters. And that's kind of the approach these guys took. Like, hey, we can operate like a tech company. We don't have to actually be profitable. We can just continue to bring in investment because they see that people know that this is worth investing in because the margins are high and it's just going to keep growing.
Yo, and before I forget, I just want to say it seems like a lot of them are just banking on federal legalization.
Well, that too,
and putting a ton of money into lobbying for it.
Because again, what happens with federal legalization, maybe some of those interest rates will cut down because now it's a legal loan they can provide. Yeah. So the debt load comes down a little bit and they can recapitalize their businesses under a lower interest rate. And so they're hoping for that too. But the real estate, what's happened with that is, a lot of these guys have done sale leasebacks. And I don't know if you're familiar with what a sale leaseback
when you lease your own shit back to yourself through different companies. Can you explain that? Do you know the mechanics of those deals?
Well, those are actually smart. Like, so if you bought a property yourself and you own it under a holding company for a retailer or a cultivator or a processor, that's the way to go. You want to do that. You want to pay yourself that for tax purposes and financially with 280E. That's the way you have to do it.
A nice comment there for you.
Hey. And then I appreciate it, man. And so like, with those real estate deals, like I would say that mostly, you're working off of a false assumption in the end, that you were going to be able to pay this off, or do well. And those sale leasebacks is what's happening is you've got like an MSO, I don't know, Curaleaf, coming in and saying, hey, dude, we like your property. we'll buy it from you, and you just got to sign a 5-year lease. The 5-year lease will cover, everything, blah, blah, blah. And it'll allow you to not have to do building maintenance and all these extra things, taxes, insurance. Like, we'll cover all that for the building. You just deal with the rent and and we'll collect the cash flow for that. And so that's a smart thing for these MSOs to do, is to get in on this real estate and become landlords, basically, to legally licensed businesses. But if you're doing it yourself as like an entrepreneur, that's the smart way to go. And even MSOs like Curaleaf and all those guys, I'm sure they're doing it themselves. But what's happening is, with those sale leasebacks, is once again, they bought these businesses or these buildings or these pieces of property for way more than they were worth, or they signed lease agreements for way more than they can afford. And so as that's crumbling, these properties cannot get remarketed for other purposes.
That's right. That's also like a rule in Vermont, I believe.
Yeah, well, it's not a rule in Michigan, but it's just like, you've converted it to a grow facility. It's going to take some work to get it into something else. And nobody wants to come in and buy a grow facility right now. Like, I'm talking with people right now about that sort of stuff. And it's like, if it's just a grow facility and that's all it is, there's just no money to be made in an indoor grow facility right now.
Can I read a quote that you said?
Yeah.
You said, these guys who own the MSOs are just finance goons, piss poor management, and they don't know what they're doing in this industry.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's 100% true. Like, several of the major, like, Michigan brands that started off, and became hotter brands or became name brands in the state, were all guys from Illinois that couldn't get licenses in the state of Illinois. So they couldn't get a license in Illinois based on the lottery, which is stupid. I will say, lotteries are freaking idiot. That's the most moronic thing I've ever heard of.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Shout out to Connecticut too. That's so you've got these lotteries, and they couldn't get a license to save their ass, and so they decided, hey, Michigan's open for business. Let's make Michigan our home. And they don't know about the plant. They have they don't care about the plant. They just want to make money off the plant. And when you reduce it down to that, obviously everything else just doesn't fall in line. And if you put the plant on the pedestal it deserves and focus on that, then everything else will fall in line. And I'm a true believer in that. And so these finance guys, they all world of, the stock market and trading, and that's what they know. And some of them might know consumer packaged goods in that industry. But I mean, everybody that I'm seeing, out there slinging prepackaged eighths and ounces and whatever else that their manufacturer makes, these people aren't true salespeople. These people aren't. They're nothing special. And if they came from the alcohol industry or the tobacco industry or candy or whatever the fuck else, I'm sorry, you're not selling that. You're not selling.
There's some of those too.
You're not selling that. Like, so I have a problem, like, especially considering I haven't been able to even get an interview for a sales job, selling cannabis anywhere for any brands, whether it's edibles, concentrates, vape carts, empty vape carts, whatever. Nobody wants to talk because I don't have CPG experience. It's like, dude, I could run circles around you people talking about different strategies at retail, but I don't, like, that's not, you guys are going about it all wrong, discounting and fucking all this bullshit when you're branding your shit wrong. You're marketing it wrong from the beginning,
Also, it seems like they're growing it wrong.
Well, that too. I mean, it starts there. So if you have a bad product all the way around, you're probably gonna have bad people pushing your product too. And it starts at the top.
One thing we talked about, I think, was seemingly this lack of their willingness to hire people with talent.
I mean, it seems at least for me, from the outside looking in, like, the people that I'm seeing on LinkedIn primarily are, and of course I'll peep their profile and see what their prior past experiences are. And I'm just like,
you too.
Really? Like you're the expert? You're the hiring manager for this? You don't know anything about this plant. You're like, who are you? Like, I'm sorry, but you shouldn't be the one making decisions on whether or not somebody gets an interview for a sales role to sell cookies. Like, I'm still pissed off about this one. And I hate cookies brand. I was just trying to get a job in the industry. And, I reached out to this person. They're like, yeah, I can't wait to talk to you. And then I get this automatic instant rejection email a day later from them. And I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, I thought you were excited to talk to me because I actually have experience that you're looking for here in territory sales, field sales, cannabis specifically, and the product. And they just tend to go to people that have no experience with cannabis first.
I've seen a lot of that.
Or friends or family. Nepotism still plays a pretty big role in the industry.
A lot of those people don't have fucking experience.
No. And so like everything that I see and like every day that I'm like on the sidelines, it reinforces why I'm kind of glad that I am. Just because I see the shit show it is. And like I want when I make my splash and I'm able to say, hey, I found a role, or hey, my business is getting off off the ground here. When that happens, I'm gonna be ecstatic because I usually I don't play nice. Like I like to win. I'm a competitor, and when I go to market, I'm not going to be nice with people. I'm not going to play nice in the sandbox as they say. Like I'm coming for their throat. Like I want your market share. And I don't want you to ever, I don't want you in part of the process. Like, and that's how I'm going to treat them. Like I'm going to have a marketing approach that's more focused on like kind of blasting their brands, to make mine look good in a way, but because nobody does that yet in the States.
Like a political attack ad campaign.
Yeah, man. Like I've got some good ideas.
Hey, it's like, hey, Cureleaf, hey, weren't you guys like some Russian gangsters or something?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways to. Tons of ways to do it, man. And I think that, like, I've got a sound approach to how that would look once that happens. But until the day comes, I'll keep quiet about it.
Yeah. Right. The one thing we talked about was, I think, pharmaceutical companies. And maybe the possibility of them coming in and buying out these MSOs.
Yeah,
How do you feel about that idea?
Yeah, for the longest time, I wasn't sure. Like I thought, like most people, that big tobacco, big alcohol was going to pretty much come in, swoop this up, and really control the lobbying efforts, and they would get a lot of mergers, tons of acquisitions as a result. Especially once like a banking act got pushed and approved. But the closer it gets to that reality, the more I'm pretty sure that it's going to be pharma. And the reason why is I did like a quick dive into the numbers on like market capitalization for alcohol, like publicly traded alcohol companies and publicly traded tobacco companies. And both of those two companies, or all of those companies, I should say, are seeing declines in their user base, which naturally, hey, we need to go get more users. Let's get this new product. However, they don't have the market capitalization that I think is going to be required to have sustainable long-term businesses that are hemorrhaging cash and have major losses on a year-to-year basis. Big pharma can afford those losses for a long time. They can afford those losses for several years, multiple years. And they can afford more acquisitions, and they can afford a lot more build outs than anyone else. And so descheduling and rescheduling is going to play a part in that too. You're either going to have one or the other. Descheduling is going to probably take it away from pharma's direct control, where they're definitely involved no matter what, if it's rescheduled, whereas descheduled is just going to really throw a loop for them and require them to just spend cash to make it happen.
I think pharma's going to be involved no matter what. They're already involved.
That cash positive position that they're in, I think they're the ones that we should be watching as far as acquisitions. They're like one pharmaceutical company could buy up the entire weed industry right now.
Well, I read a story a few years back about Pfizer just dumping $8 billion into the industry. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That's what they do.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Those are their revenue streams aren't going anywhere anytime soon. The price of drugs are just going up in America. We're rarely legislating against it, if at all. And so that's going up. People are still getting sick on record numbers. And so those drugs are going to continue to get purchased. And, I think they're in the best position, whereas alcohol and tobacco users are dwindling, not to the point where like nobody's buying it anymore, but they're down like 2-3% year to year. And it's happened like that in the last few years too. And part of that is people are enjoying cannabis a little bit more, or alternatives like psilocybin and things like that. And so, there's less need for alcohol, but I'm with you, man. I'm sensing more lately that I just feel it. I feel pharma is going to be the winners in the end of this, like how it all shakes out in the end, like Curaleaf, Verano, GTI, they'll be subsidiaries of one of the major pharmaceutical companies. I truly believe. I don't, maybe InBev buys one. I just don't know, like, or maybe it's like a joint venture between a pharmaceutical company and InBev, like for bottling or something like that. I just don't know how I don't know where it's going to go, but I definitely see pharma being involved. I really do.
I wanted to ask you, I got a couple more here. I'm getting towards the end.
Sure.
But one thing we talked about was consumption lounges.
Yeah. I mean,
I'd like to hear your thoughts on that idea.
Yeah. There's not much like out there right now. It's like, I think there's maybe a handful nationally that are legally licensed by the state that they're in. I think a couple in Arizona, some in Colorado, California. Michigan has 2 right now. And they're both kind of like average to middling. they're not special, right? Vegas is going to be the spot. Like they're going to be probably the number 1 consumption lounge location in the country, just based on tourism alone, and the number of people they get through that city. I could see it being huge there. But I see consumption lounges just because they're in their infancy and they are just now getting legislated into law in some states. Michigan, it's been the same law has been in place since I've been looking at entering the space, and I've kind of sat on the sidelines watching, seeing why this wasn't happening, where it was happening, what it looked like, and really what it comes down to is most operators just aren't sophisticated enough in business to be able to functionally run this type of operation. And what I mean by that is it can't just be a lounge where people come and get high, because you can't sell product. You can't sell weed to, the customers there.
That is the issue.
They have to purchase it outside, whether it's a retail shop attached to your business or it's a place locally or whatever. So you have to have other revenue streams. And most cannabis entrepreneurs don't know how to run a restaurant. They don't know food and beverage at all. They don't know memberships and cover charges. They just don't know how to run that type of business and actually make it profitable. And so that's part of it. And the other part is, I just think that, we're not quite there yet. Like hospitality, cannabis hospitality is the next phase. It's going to be it's going to be the next like thing that kicks off the industry and pushes it in a new direction. And
like weddings and shit like that. Like if they would let people do private.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's going to break the stigma, right? But it's going to take its time because it's going to require strategic, consumption lounges in locations where people can visibly see that it's okay, that it's fine to let these people enjoy this in this property, because nothing bad's happening here. And so there's going to be more of those coming about in Michigan alone. I think there's 2 or 3 in the works this year. One of them's about 2 hours north of me that will be opening in summer. That's more similar to the concept that I've personally developed over the years. They're just beating me to market with a lot more money. And guess what? Finance boys.
Well, the money moves so fast now. It's like,
yeah.
Click of a button and you got your money over here and then it's over there. And then,
And so there's tons of opportunity. Like you said, events, any type of event, educational events, seminars, weddings, watch parties, video game tournaments, you name it, you could come up with something around
video game tournaments. That's a good one there. Jeez, don't say that out loud. Jeez.
Yeah, it's already out there. A lot of my ideas already out there. And so a lot of the concept that I have, it'll be unique in its own way, but it's not like earth shattering. It just will be, what I think I'm building and what others are trying to build, or maybe somebody will beat me to it, will be a national destination. One of the first of its kind in the state of Michigan, in the Midwest, and nationally, because it'll be a true, campus for seed to consumption, where it will be unlike really any other single source solution you have, because you can actually consume it there too. Whatever the consumption side looks like, I'm not going to divulge too much into that. But it's a very large space with there will be a very visible locale. As far as I can't announce anything because I'm not there yet. But
I didn't need you to announce anything. I was just curious about the idea, because and you brought up the point about how there's no, it's not like a regular business where you buy this commercial real estate and then people come in and spend money. They just come in and they're getting high. It's like, oh, how do we pay for this? Like, yeah, that seems to be the issue.
Yeah, it is. And that's the thing, is like, you can't let your consumption lounge be a loss leader. Like, that's not really, it's a solution, but it's not really a smart solution. No smart business owner would do that, right? Like, how much of a hit am I going to take just to have this cool spot over here? Right. I don't think that's smart. Like, it needs to be standalone. It needs to be a standalone business that I can.
Or you gotta have Bezos money for that.
Yeah. But so, like, I've developed a concept, and I have experience in the food and beverage industry as well, that like this is totally feasible. It's not going to take a rocket scientist to put it all together. It's like, it's going to take some money. It's going to take some capital, and it's going to take a little bit of risk. But the blueprint's there. I'm working with a group of people that we're trying to get across the finish line on a deal. Some of those people are my family members and his business partner, and then some people that are already actively in the industry, licensed in the industry, but want the same things I want, share the same vision I share. And I just hope that it all works out, because that's what I want. I want to get it going.
I'm pulling for you, Charles.
Oh man, I am too, man. I appreciate it. That's I really want, because at the end of the day, I really miss my hospitality role. Like, I used to work in hotels too. And
me too.
I actually, that was one of the funnest jobs I had. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, you had to put on that smiley face. And sometimes you weren't really always the happiest at the time, but you did it anyway. And then you found out that maybe it was not so bad being happy and trying to pretend to be happy. And so I was like, I kind of liked it. And, but always trying to please people, and always trying to, that was part of what I brought into, like, when I started growing, and like making sure that people weren't getting taken advantage of. Like, hey, I'm going to provide you a good price to this product. because I'm growing it, I'm going to be able to provide you a better product. But I made sure customer service was right. And, I'll always translate that into anything I do and taking care of people. But I'm looking for that connection again, to build that community, to have a place where, people can come and consume, talk about products, share products, sample different things, educate themselves, learn, and make new friends, because that's kind of, this plant's brought me a lot of new friends, a lot of new people in my life that
like most of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really, the community you build within this plan, what it's allowed for, like networking. There's other ways to network, but this is one of those natural things that you find a lot of common similarities with people, that plant doesn't have. Like outside in the community, it takes a while before oh, I knew you smoked. Like you could tell that person did, but you didn't know until you had that conversation. And so I kind of like that part of it too.
Yeah. I got one more question for you, Charles, and it's about the marijuana policy project. We talked a little bit about them, and I was curious if you had any thoughts on that organization.
Yeah, so who did we all start with? Like Normal and probably MPP was probably like the place, the websites that you would go to get like your most recent updates for what was happening in the weed world, legislation. Like Normal and MPP were like the places I would go to in like 2010, 2011, 2012, 13 to like get information. Eventually I stopped paying attention to Normal. And then, I pretty much stopped paying attention to MPP just because they seem to be kind of more corporate, bought and paid for types of folks. And that really came to fruition.
When was that, Charles? When did you start following them, and when do you think you
that was over a decade ago or so. And I really wasn't aware of their kind of corporate leanings. I guess it wasn't visibly in my face until I met really Lou. And he posted some things here and there, but more than that was I saw Toy Hutchinson was given the role as, I don't know, the head president or whatever the hell.
Who is Toy Hutchinson?
She was a former Illinois politician who was, I think, the state house, or she was in charge of something over there at the state of Illinois. I think she was in charge of the whole cannabis legislation as well as implementing it in the state. She might have been like the
czar.
The czar, yeah, like the CCC
is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
Yeah, she might have been in that role with them.
Sounded kind of sorry.
Either way, long story short, she got caught doing some dirty shit in Illinois. Pretty sure she was caught up in a big old scandal with a bunch of people. They were, I don't know, doing some federal bribes and whatever. And she was in that group. She wasn't named. I don't know if she was named or whatever. But Mike Noonan, he owns a micro business in the state of Michigan. Illinois resident, couldn't get a license in Illinois, came to Michigan. He's friends with Toy. He used to help Toy, campaigned for her, ran her campaigns. He also ran a bunch of campaigns for federally indicted people on the Democratic Party. And so their relationship, I noticed this on, like, I think it was Instagram, or Twitter. She posted something congratulating him. And that's when I realized, oh, that's who Toy is. That's kind of, she's like basically this fake social equity person that's just, out there pushing the narrative that this is great for everyone when it's actually not. But she's being a person of color. She's out there doing this. And so it looks like, hey, a person of color is trying to talk about, equity. This is a good thing, but really it's just a corporate, veil of corporate deceit. And
there were some politicians in Michigan, I believe, or at least one person on the cannabis board was busted for accepting bribes.
Yeah, so the early on, Rick Johnson, who was he was in charge of the medical board of approving medical applications for licensing. Yeah, he was taking bribes. One of those people happens to be one of the finance boys I was talking about earlier who couldn't get a license in Illinois and moved to Michigan. I'll just say it. No, I can't say it. I might catch a charge.
Okay.
So, but so yeah, so so either way, big name in the southwest Michigan market, has a lot of processing and cultivation, and they're all over the state as far as their product. But yeah, they were paying bribes amongst many others, and so this Rick Johnson took a plea deal, I think maybe to hide some of these people's names and information, because they're not
Took one for the team.
Yeah, but I know somebody that's told me exactly who's involved in this, and so yeah, there's a lot of shady dealings going on there, but the Toy and the Marijuana Policy Project, they aren't in it to make the industry better and to try to pass legalization the right way. It's to advance the multi-state operators and their agenda. That's really what it is.
It does seem like they've lobbied against some things that have made barriers to entry higher. And
yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, like, if you were to, like, I haven't followed MPP enough to say, hey, this is, they came out in support of this bill or against this one. I don't know, their track record of more recent stuff, but
let's get it. If the MPP is listening, please send us your track record of stuff.
Yeah, but honestly,
I want to see all of it.
I bet if we were to go through it, we would see some that is very anti-consumer, very anti-home grow, all of that. And I think that they're not helping themselves any. They might be embedding themselves into legislators' offices and things like that. But as we know, is that really a benefit for the people if you're cozying up to legislators who aren't looking out for you anyway? I mean, they're looking out for business, federally at least, they're looking out for business, and really statewide, that's the same way for most states. It's government's there for business, so they're not really there for the consumer.
More of a corporation now.
Yeah, we are. I mean, we run like a corporation. We're for the corporation, by the corporation. It's almost like the what was that game? It was a Biohazard. Biohazard Infinite is like a corporate dystopia. Like we're headed towards that.
Molly or something.
Yeah, like we're headed towards that dystopia. It seems like day in and day out. Like we just let corporations run wild, and like I think it was Cyberpunk. That new game Cyberpunk had like the corporations were in control of the different blocks of the city or whatever, and it's like that's what's going to happen eventually.
Are you a video game guy, Charles?
I grew up with them, but I haven't played a lot lately.
Okay, yeah.
But I'm familiar with most games. Yeah, I pay attention.
Look, I'm out of shit, and I thought that was a great note to leave it on here. So this is the end of the show, and I always, if we missed anything, or if you have any shameless plugs or shout outs you want to send, now is the time. Charles Alkire, thank you so much for your time, man.
Hey, appreciate it, Caleb. Thanks.
No shout outs? You got nothing?
I mean, well, let me get some shout outs. I got my phone blowing up, but I want to shout out first to Mr. Lou Rinaldi.
Hey.
I appreciate all his support over the last few years, our friendship, introducing us, but more than that, the whole Divine Tribe. If you're listening, anybody in the tribe, hey guys, love you guys. Really love your support. I'm not doing this for them, but honestly, a lot of the stuff that I've done over the last few years is really me trying to get these group of internet people together in real life at some point so that we can all meet, hang out, sesh. And part of the reason why I'm doing this is I want to have a place that we can do that. I don't want to have to do it illegally in my home in Indiana. So I'd love to have a legal establishment in Michigan that I can invite anybody from around the country to come and hang out. And so shout out to them. Shout out to not my employer, but to LinkedIn and anybody that interacts with me on a daily basis there. I appreciate it. And hopefully we continue to rock out.
Look at this. Look at this. One more comment for you. This dude has taught me so much. It would have taken me years longer to get shit done without his wisdom. It's an honor to call him a friend. He inspires me and keeps me sharp.
I don't even know what I provided over those.
You guys want to make out here? You need a room, Lou? No,
Charles. It's all love, man.
Yeah, this has been a pleasure. I'm gonna check out here. Charles Alkire, U.S. Army veteran, cannabis entrepreneur. I'm your host, Caleb Teskey, and remember, the devil's in the details, and the details are in the fine print.